Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game. So today I got a very interesting and unfortunately a bit disappointing video for you guys this morning. It's all about the Internet Archive's current appeal with a book publisher, or multiple at that, and the fact that their appeal was not upheld in court. And while this is only tangentially related to video games, as far as the actual lawsuit is concerned, it has massive ramifications for retro gaming and its preservation going forward. We're going to get into the video, we're going to explain why, and we're going to go through it in detail. But stick with me on this one, because even though at face value it doesn't have anything to do with video games, it has a lot to do with preservation, as well as one of the facts that the Internet Archive is probably the largest site for gaming preservation ever to exist and probably ever will exist. Think about something like Vimm's Lair and games being removed, and then we're just going to take that concept and move it over to the Internet Archive, because they lost their appeal on a court case, Hatchett Books versus the Internet Archive. This was all based upon the Internet Archive being a lending library on a one-to-one basis, which means they owned a book, they could lend one out at a time as an ebook variant. And I'm pretty sure I don't really need to tell anyone what the Internet Archive is. It is basically our modern day digitized Library of Alexandria, where so much is held as a knowledge base, and so many different academic researchers use the Internet Archive every day, and I relied on it for a lot of my degrees when it came to researching classic films and different details behind it. There's even an article right now on modernist housing and researching and preserving them on the Internet Archive. So like I said, not really gaming related in that instance, but very important all the same. So unfortunately, this lawsuit between Hatchett Books as well as the Internet Archive has been found in favor of the book publishers. Basically, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit found that digitizing the books violated copyright law, and that is a very big finding and an unfortunate one for the Internet Archive. Basically, they were digitizing these books and lending them out one-to-one copies. If they digitized one book, they were allowed to lend one book until that book was quote-unquote returned digitally, then they could lend it out again. And as far as copyright lawsuits are concerned, we've been talking about them a lot on the channel. US copyright is a very big quagmire of a law set. There's so many different subsections, so while these things are related, they definitely are adjacent to each other and separate as well. But this is what we get into when we talk about lawsuits, copyright, intellectual property rights, DMCA, and everything such as that. They're all different mechanisms that you can use to shut down something you don't think would be legally permissible, and sometimes even if it should be allowed, you can just use it to try to get the person that's doing the thing you don't like to stop via the court system. And that's a little bit, I feel like, at least what we're seeing here with the Internet Archive lawsuit. Basically, during the 2020 You Know What Happened, can't say it here, they were starting to lend more books than they had access to, basically because they considered it a national emergency library. When you couldn't leave the house, when your kids couldn't go to school, the Internet Archive allowed people to access knowledge so that people could still continue to educate themselves and learn. That is the basis of this lawsuit. And again, I hope you're still with me here. I know this is only gaming related in the preservation aspect. We're going to be talking a lot about books in this one. But this goes down to the laws on copying objects, copying items, how they are preserved, and how many copies you can make and when you need to destroy them. So unfortunately, the Internet Archive lost this appeal, and that puts them in a very dangerous situation, which we're going to get to in just a moment. But think to yourself, how many times in the last year have you visited the Internet Archive, and what have you obtained from there? Because there are items on there that only exist on the archive unless they're actually preserved by others. Think of it in the instance of Vimm's Lair. Some of the games on there are absolutely some of the most obscure games imaginable. They are no longer offered for sale, they are no longer distributed. The only way to play them outside of probably buying a copy that might run into the thousands is to use preservation efforts online. Now you can think that's correct, you can think that's incorrect, you could make whatever moral decision you want. The reality is these preservation efforts allow this media, allow this knowledge to continue on into the future, and without them so much would be lost. And just think about how much has already been lost before these projects actually started up. But the big issue here, and it always ends up being music or films, is that the Internet Archive is also being sued over a music project. Basically what the Internet Archive is doing is digitizing old 78 RPM records. You might be familiar with LPs and 45s. If you go raid your grandparents' record cabinets, odds are you're going to find a bunch of 78s in there. They're getting exceedingly hard to actually locate, and the Internet Archive is preserving them for everyone. But the music labels are saying that that's 2,749 copyright violations, and that the damages could be as high as $412 million. If we round up, you're basically talking about $500 million in potential damages, and of course you're going to deal with lawyers' fees as well. And if you were curious, no, the Internet Archive does not have $500 million to throw around if they lose a lawsuit. Looks like they maybe have around 40 million, give or take, on a good day. So obviously, if you can't tell already, if they lose too many of these lawsuits, and they've already lost one, they are going to absolutely go bankrupt. And what do you think happens in the Internet Archive after it goes bankrupt? Well, in a metaphorical way, it kind of burns down like the Library of Alexandria. All of the knowledge, all of the preservation on the Internet Archive is at risk at going away. I know you're going to leave that clickbait comment, but this is how things work. These companies win lawsuits, they get damages, and then from there they basically headshot the company to make sure it doesn't exist anymore. And of course I was able to get some gaming footage in this because it is a gaming video. Something like Golgo 13 right here only ever came out in arcades, and unless you find an original arcade cabinet, it is impossible to play. You can't purchase it, it is not available online, but of course if you look around the Internet Archive, odds are you're going to find a file there that's going to work with MAME and allow you to play one of the best hidden gems, pun extremely intended in this instance, as far as arcade hidden gems are concerned. And that is why this is such a massive danger, because the judges in this case found that they were creating derivative works which would not be allowed. Now there isn't any data to support what the settlement was as far as the actual damages on this case were concerned, but you can see here that it was argued June 28th, 2024 and decided September 4th, 2024. And you always have to love the appeals court system. They always use this old English style font. I'm not sure why, it's just been a holdover every time I read these things. It is the same font. And basically again, the argument was whether or not they were able to have this free digital library that allowed for more than one book to be checked out at once. And remember, the Internet Archive did this when everyone was stuck with stay at home and couldn't actually leave the house. You have to think to yourself, legal right versus moral right. Sometimes the moral right, in my opinion, overrides the legal right, even though that is not how our court system works. Book publishers are upset that the Internet Archive allowed people to access knowledge they wouldn't otherwise be able to access while they were stuck at home. That is the crux of this first case here, and that is just absolutely, in my opinion, 100% shameful, preventing people from accessing information during something like stay at home. But unfortunately, the appeals court found in the favor of the publishers, so now it's perhaps possible that the Internet Archive could appeal this to an even higher court, maybe go all the way to the top, but they have to decide how much the damages are going to be and whether or not their appetite is worth actually continuing to pay lawyers. It's possible they have lawyers on staff, his salary doesn't cost anything, I just don't know that. And this is really what's happening in 2024, and I think it's going to continue to happen. You're going to see so many lawsuits about these sort of things, so many DMCA takedown requests, so many copyright violation lawsuits. It's just going to go on and on and on, because companies do not want you to be able to access anything whatsoever unless they are selling it to you. And honestly, if they lose a $412 million judgment against record labels, they are probably going to have absolutely no ability to pay, and the Internet Archive could very likely go offline, because again, even if you double or triple what Wikipedia states they have as an operating budget and cash on hand in the bank, you're not anywhere near $412 million. So this, honestly, I'm sure you're going to say is clickbait, but is an existential threat to the preservation of games, because just think about how much is on Internet Archive that is available nowhere else. And if Internet Archive loses these lawsuits, just think about the absolute damage it'll do to gaming preservation online. Leave me a comment down below, tell me what you think. I'm sure some people are going to think I'm overstating it, but trust me, in this instance I'm not. But I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.